Stop supporting victim mentality. I promise you, it's hurting you more than it's hurting them. Okay, my name is Dwight Light, and today I'm going to take a deep dive into victim mentality and how it affects us and those around us, right? One thing I'm not going to speak about is how to remove yourself from victim mentality. Most victims, and this is why, most victims need to be a victim to gain resources, right? Whether that's financial resources, whether that's a place to live, whether that's sympathy, empathy, everything except for accountability. They're looking for all the things, right? Except for accountability and responsibility. So I'm not going to remove their food source. I'm going to allow them to feed as they continue to feed on the individuals who believe and support the whole victim mentality. So with that being said, I am going to address the supporters of victim mentality, mainly because they may not all the way understand the ramifications of their actions, right? Of um, how they're hindering someone's growth. I live right around the corner from the national park, and it's a beautiful park. You see monkeys everywhere. There's abundance of monkeys, right? And you're gonna see signs that say, "Don't feed the monkeys." And the reason why is because you don't want to get them off of their natural food source, right? God has created the perfect ecosystem for them to survive and thrive without human support. By feeding the monkeys, you disrupt the entire ecosystem, and they don't necessarily want to feed off of what's naturally created for them, but the garbage and junk that has you addicted now has them addicted, right? And I've heard of extreme circumstances to where monkeys have jumping on people's backs to get their backpacks, open their backpacks up to get those chips, all that sugary substance, right? So now there's disharmony that's created in nature, right? And supporters, I know you want to give to somebody, right? And I know you have a giving heart, you have an enormous heart, and at times you may feel taken advantage of. So I'm going to give you an outlet or a way to give without taking away somebody's progress, because anytime you give to a victim, you're not allowing them their due process so that they can survive in the wild, in the concrete jungle. So in essence, you are micromanaging God, because that gap right there that you see between where you're at and you're supporting the victim, you try to close that gap, but they always end up separating back to who they are, victim, right? And that gap, I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if this makes sense, right? But that gap is where God fits in. And you can continue to do your thing, they can continue to do their thing, and God will help them get to that next level, right? They have a connection to God that you have. We all have the same connection to the same source. Nobody's better than anyone else, okay? No matter what you believe and no matter what the victims they say, right? Because you, as a supporter of a victim mentality, you probably went through something in life that created the superior person that you are to where you can give. Okay, so back when I owned real estate in the States, I was a Section 8 landlord. That's all I focused on. I only dealt with Section 8 vouchers. And for those of you who don't know what Section 8 is, it's a government funded program that helps, for the most part, single moms, but also the elderly and also single parents, single fathers as well. I've seen that. Okay, so quick shout out to my pops. He's the one that taught me the whole Section 8 process. That's all he dealt with was Section 8 tenants, and I learned from him. He had a process for screening the tenants. I didn't when I first started. I ignored it, I'll say, because I was going after the money. For me, it was about who has the highest voucher amount, right? Who has a $1,000, $1,100 a month voucher that the government will be responsible for 90 or even 100% of the voucher, because I didn't want to even be bothered with picking up rent. You know, I was lazy. I was a lazy landlord. I started off that way, and I paid the cost because I attracted a lot of victim mentality tenants, which was a disaster for me. It was a very valuable learning experience, because I learned that tenants that have 100% or above 80% government support assistance, they usually didn't have a job, and they wasn't really looking for a job because they wanted more support. So that's more wear and tear on the property, because they're there 24/7. And they have people over, and then things get broken. It's just it's chaotic, right? So I had to instill a process to where I was looking for, and then I had to have an interview process. I had to start interviewing tenants that didn't have that victim mentality, and ironically, it's the ones who needed halfway support from the government or a little support from the government, and they had a plan for exiting the program, right? That was the main thing right there. If they had a plan for exiting the program, then that means that they have accountability and they're going to be responsible for the property because, one, they're close to getting out, right? They don't want to ruin that voucher. But then two, they're preparing for home ownership. Their mentality is just different. Okay, victim supporters, I just gave you two examples, okay? The first example was a career victim mentality person. They don't have any interest in being nothing outside of a victim. And the irony of that, as you guys hear the parrots going crazy right now. Yeah, we have parrots, toucans, all that good stuff out here in Costa Rica. So the irony in the victim number one scenario is they actually have, in the Section 8 world, they have the capacity to pass down their voucher to their children, right? So the government is teaching this, like, okay, you want to continue to be a victim, you could continue to be a victim, don't get a job, and you could teach your children to do the same thing, right? And then you have the other victim who's not, I wouldn't really necessarily call them a victim because they're on their way out, right? They have accountability and responsibility, and they're trying to do something. They have a process, they have a goal. So for you victim supporters, I want you to make sure that anybody you support financially, whatever, that they have a plan to get out of this situation and that you see progress in them getting themselves out of that situation. Otherwise, you're going to have a victim number one situation, and it's going to be a very stressful event for you. Okay, it's not something you really want to deal with, and I'm going by experience. Okay, and of course, I can't leave you without a metaphysical example or a metaphysical reason for making sure that you don't support this victim mentality. Okay, so when it comes to frequency, you have to always understand that you're in a state of attraction, right? We live in a yes universe, meaning that whatever you believe to be true in your heart, the universe says, yes, I'm going to support that. So with the victims, what happens is they get into this victim state, and the universe says, okay, let me give you more proof that this is true for you. Let me allow you to see how clearly it is that you're a victim, right? And we're not going to show you anything else, nothing. So you're not going to find any Dwight Light on your feed, okay? Because that's not what you want, right? You want to stay in that victim status. So now the universe has to find someone, a supporter of that victim mentality, okay? So those two attract like magnets, and they're connected, right? And they're connected in a lower vibratory state. And what that means is the person with the higher frequency always comes down to the person with the lower vibratory rate, okay? And now you're in a lower frequency, and now you're seeing what it's like to be in a lower frequency. You're hearing the complaints. The man is holding me down. All these different excuses as to why they can't progress, and you're connected to that. And if you're honest with yourself, you know that you feel down when you're around this person or these individuals. You know that it's bringing you down. You're feeling your heart. You can feel it after every single interaction. And your feelings aren't going to lie and mislead you. Understand, when you feel that, you're in a vibratory state to where you're going to attract other individuals, because the universe is saying we got to co-create a victim for this person who supports victims. The universe is saying these other victims, we got to make sure we have other individuals who can bring themselves down to a lower state to support that victim. Hopefully it makes sense. Okay guys, to wrap this all up, if you're gonna go down to a lower frequency state to help someone, make sure that they have a process and a plan to get out of the situation. And then also, you wanna make sure you hold them accountable, right? This creates enough space and gap for God to seep in. So once you have that space, God seeps in, you could go back to your higher vibratory state, and they're not gonna bug you too much because you already said, look, I'm expecting to see XYZ, and they will do XYZ, and eventually they will raised to a higher vibratory state where you're at, okay? And then that's the end of the game, right? So I'm gonna leave you with this quote, and this is something that stuck with me. I forget who I heard it from, but there are two types of individuals that you meet in life, one with batteries and one without. So the one with batteries, they are inspirational, they're motivational, they raise your frequency up every time you're around them, right? They don't need your energy, but you guys feed off of one another and help one another grow. The ones without batteries, they're energy vampires, okay? They're sucking your energy constantly and lowering your frequency. So the best advice I can give you is give them one set of batteries and get the hell out. Peace.